I grew up as the black sheep in a proud military dynasty. My father, a decorated Navy captain, never hid his disappointment in me compared to my younger brother Eric, who excelled at everything military. For years, my family believed I had washed out of Navy training, a failure they reluctantly tolerated at holiday gatherings. Little did they know I had taken a very different path in service to my country. When I received the invitation to Eric's SEAL ceremony, I knew attending meant risking exposure of the truth I had kept hidden for years. Before I share how years of family judgment collapsed in seconds, let me know where you are watching from, and hit subscribe if you want more stories about family misconceptions getting shattered in the most satisfying ways. Growing up in San Diego meant living in the shadow of naval history, something my family took extremely personally. Our family tree read like a Navy recruitment brochure, with service dating back to my great-grandfather who served in World War II. My father, William Mason, better known as Iron Bill in military circles, had built his identity around being a strict, uncompromising naval captain who expected nothing less than excellence from his children. My mother, Margaret, though loving in her own way, deferred to my father in all matters relating to our upbringing and future plans. She came from a military family herself, and understood the weight of tradition that hung over our household. While she occasionally offered private comfort when I failed to meet my father's expectations, she never openly contradicted him. Then there was my younger brother Eric, 3 years my junior, but seemingly built from the same steel as our father. Naturally athletic, with an easy charisma that drew people to him, Eric could swim faster, run longer, and command attention in any room from an early age. I still remember my father beaming with pride at Eric's high school swimming championships, already envisioning the perfect SEAL candidate he would become. I was different. Quieter. More analytical. I preferred strategy games and books about military history rather than physical competitions. While I was never weak or incapable, my strengths lay in areas my father considered secondary to the physical prowess he valued above all else. The Mason men are doers, not thinkers, my father would say whenever he caught me reading instead of joining Eric for his training runs. Books never won wars, Christopher. By high school, the pressure to follow the family tradition had become suffocating. My father had my entire naval career mapped out before I even received my diploma. During family dinners, he would regale us with stories of his deployments, always ending with pointed remarks about how Eric and I would soon be creating our own stories to tell. When my aptitude tests in senior year showed strong analytical skills and problem-solving capabilities, my guidance counselor suggested intelligence services might be a better fit than traditional naval roles. I made the mistake of mentioning this at dinner. Intelligence, my father scoffed. Sitting behind a desk while real sailors do the fighting, no son of mine is taking the easy way out. The conversation ended there, but something shifted inside me. For the first time, I began considering a path that wasn't entirely dictated by my father's expectations. During my final semester, I arranged a private meeting with a military recruiter who saw potential in me that went beyond my family's narrow vision. He explained options I had never heard discussed at our dinner table, specialized roles that required different kinds of courage and commitment than what my father valued. When I graduated and announced my intention to join the Navy, my father finally showed a glimmer of pride. What I didn't tell him was that I had already been flagged for a different trajectory than he imagined. Basic training was my last connection to the path my father had envisioned. I deliberately maintained distance during this time, limiting calls home and providing vague updates. When the time came for specialized training assignments, I made a decision that would shape the next decade of my life. I would allow my family to believe whatever they wanted about my military career. The last family gathering before my supposed failure was tense, with unspoken expectations. My father dominated the conversation with advice and warnings about the challenges ahead. "The dropout rate is high for a reason," he said, pouring himself another whiskey. "The weak get filtered out. But Masons are not weak." 6 months later, when I missed a family Christmas due to my first classified assignment, the story my father constructed to explain my absence took on a life of its own. Rather than question it, I allowed the misconception to grow. I still remember the painful dinner the following year when I briefly visited home. They spoke about me as if I wasn't present, my father explaining to extended family members how I had washed out of training. "Some men just aren't cut from the right cloth," he said, clapping Eric on the shoulder. Thankfully, this one is carrying on the real family tradition. I could have corrected him. I could have shown him the redacted documents proving my service, but something in me hardened that night. If this was the story they needed to tell themselves, I would let them believe it while I forged my own path far from their judgment. The truth about my military career would have shocked my family to their core. While they imagined me working some civilian desk job embarrassed by my failure, I was actually being recruited into a special intelligence division that operated in the shadows of conventional military operations. My first meeting with Colonel James Harrington changed everything. Unlike my father, he saw my analytical mind as an asset, not a weakness. "The military needs warriors of all types, Mason," he told me after reviewing my file. "Some fight with weapons, others with information. Both save lives." He became the mentor my father never was, guiding me through specialized training that bore little resemblance to the SEAL pipeline Eric would eventually enter. While Eric would learn to navigate hostile waters and engage in direct combat, I was being trained to navigate complex intelligence networks and engage in information warfare that happened far from any traditional battlefield. The classified nature of my operations made secrecy not just preferable but mandatory. Even if I had wanted to correct my family's misconceptions, security protocols severely limited what I could share. So when my father assumed I had failed, it became easier to let him believe that than to navigate the complicated half-truths security clearance would require. My natural aptitude for intelligence work quickly became apparent. Where others saw disconnected data points, I recognized patterns. When analysts struggled to predict enemy movements, I could anticipate 3 steps ahead. Colonel Harrington noticed, and my advancement accelerated accordingly. My first overseas assignment came just 18 months into my new role. While my family thought I was finding myself after military disappointment, I was actually coordinating critical intelligence operations from a secure facility in Eastern Europe. The 12-hour shifts, analyzing intercepts and directing field agents, was grueling in ways my father would never understand or appreciate. That first mission's success led to others each more critical than the last. By my 4th year of service, I had risen through ranks faster than the standard trajectory, earning commendations that lived only in classified personnel files. I still remember the operation in North Africa that earned me my promotion to major. Our team had uncovered a previously unknown terrorist cell planning a mass casualty attack. The 72 sleepless hours that followed involved coordinating with 6 international intelligence agencies and directing tactical teams across 3 countries. When it was over, the threat had been neutralized with 0 civilian casualties and no public knowledge of how close to disaster they had come. Colonel Harrington personally delivered my promotion. "Your father was wrong about you, son," he said, breaking protocol by referencing my personal life. "You were made for this work." While my career flourished, my connection to family withered by design. The bonds I formed with fellow intelligence officers became my real support system. These men and women knew my true value and understood the sacrifices required by our profession. We celebrated victories no one else would ever know about and mourned losses the public would never hear of. Contact with family became increasingly sporadic and strained. Holiday calls home were exercises in deflection and half-truths. Still, at that insurance company, my father would ask, referring to the cover story I had allowed to develop. Something like that, I would answer, listening to his disappointed sigh. My mother tried to bridge the widening gap with awkward attempts at conversation, but the foundation of secrets made genuine connection impossible. Eric occasionally texted updates about his progress through SEAL training. Unlike my father, he never seemed to judge my supposed failure, though his messages carried the unspoken weight of being the family's sole military success. "Dad's throwing a big party for my completion of Bud divided by S training," one message read. "You should come if you can get away from work." I didn't attend. The contrast between his celebrated achievements and my hidden ones would have been too stark to bear. The inner conflict about maintaining the deception grew as my responsibilities increased. There were moments when I nearly broke, almost telling my mother the truth during one particularly difficult Christmas call. but the habits of secrecy were deeply ingrained by then. My most recent field operation had been the most significant of my career. What began as an intelligence-gathering mission in Southeast Asia evolved into identifying a major security breach that threatened multiple Allied operations. The sensitivity was so high that I personally briefed generals and cabinet-level officials on my findings and recommendations. The successful resolution earned me a battlefield promotion to colonel at 35 years old, one of the youngest in my division's history. The irony that my father would have finally been proud of this accomplishment wasn't lost on me, but after years of his dismissal, his approval had ceased to be my motivation. It was 2 weeks after this promotion that Eric's invitation arrived at my secure mail drop. His SEAL graduation ceremony would be a major affair with high-ranking officers and family in attendance. My initial instinct was to decline to continue the separation that had defined our relationship for years. But something had shifted in me. Perhaps it was the confidence that came with my recent advancement, or maybe just exhaustion with the deception. Whatever the reason, I found myself requesting leave to attend. My commanding officer raised an eyebrow when I mentioned it was for family. "They still think you wash out?" he asked, familiar with my unusual background. "Yes, sir. And you're okay maintaining that cover if necessary. I've had years of practice, sir." He nodded, signing the authorization. "Just remember your clearance limitations if questions arise." The journey back to American soil after years of limited contact felt surreal. As military transport gave way to commercial flights, and finally the rental car driving into San Diego, I mentally prepared for facing my family's continued misconceptions. What I couldn't prepare for was how completely those misconceptions would shatter in a single moment. I arrived at Naval Base Coronado wearing civilian clothes that deliberately downplayed my military connection. The visitor badge clipped to my jacket revealed nothing about my actual rank or position. For all appearances, I was just another proud family member coming to celebrate a new SEAL. From a distance, I observed my family gathering near the ceremony entrance. My father stood tall in his formal naval uniform, his captain's insignia gleaming in the California sunshine. My mother fussed with her dress beside him, while various aunts, uncles, and family friends clustered around, all there to witness Eric's achievement. Drawing a deep breath, I approached them. My father noticed me first, his expression shifting from surprise to something resembling pity. "Christopher," he said stiffly. "Didn't expect you to make it." "I wouldn't miss Eric's big day," I replied, accepting my mother's warm but nervous hug. "Well, it is good you are showing support for your brother," my father added with a tone that clearly finished the thought, "even if you couldn't succeed yourself." My mother quickly intervened, always the peacekeeper. "We should find our seats. They are very strict about starting on time." Eric spotted me as we moved toward the seating area and broke away from a group of his fellow graduates. His genuine smile was a stark contrast to my father's cool reception. "Chris, you actually came." He embraced me with unexpected warmth. "It means a lot, man." I could see the confusion in his eyes, the unspoken question about why I would subject myself to this reminder of what my father considered my greatest failure. But there was no time to explain as a uniformed officer began directing families to their designated sections. My father naturally took the center position in our family row with my mother beside him. I deliberately positioned myself at the edge of our group, maintaining physical distance that mirrored the emotional gulf between us. The ceremony venue was impressive, with rows of white chairs facing a stage draped in Navy and American flags. High-ranking officers filled the front section, their shoulders heavy with insignia representing decades of service. Under different circumstances, I might have recognized several as people I had briefed during various operations. As the ceremony began, I watched my father's face transform with pride as Eric's unit marched in with military precision. His expression spoke volumes. This was the son who fulfilled the Mason legacy. I felt a complex mix of emotions watching the proceedings, pride for my brother intermingling with the weight of years of misunderstanding. The ceremony progressed through speeches about sacrifice, honor, and the elite status of the Navy SEALs. Eric and his classmates stood at attention, embodying everything my father had always valued. Then came the moment that would change everything. General Michael Davidson, a decorated 4-star general with significant operational authority across multiple theaters, approached the podium for the commendation speeches. I recognized him immediately, having briefed him just months earlier on the Southeast Asia situation. My body tensed instinctively, but I remained outwardly calm, hoping the brief encounter during a classified briefing wouldn't register in his memory. Today, we welcome these exceptional men into the most elite special operations force in the world, the general began. His gaze swept across the audience as he spoke about honor and sacrifice, about the unique demands placed on SEALs and their families. And then it happened. His eyes locked onto mine, recognition dawning immediately. The general paused mid-sentence, squinting slightly to confirm what he was seeing. The moment stretched into uncomfortable silence before he spoke again. "Colonel Mason, you are here." A hush fell over the crowd. My father's head snapped toward me, confusion and disbelief contorting his features. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. Eric, standing at attention on stage, broke protocol to turn and stare in my direction. I stood slowly, offering the formal acknowledgement military protocol demanded when addressed by a superior officer. "Yes, General Davidson." The general looked genuinely surprised. "I was not aware you were related to one of our graduates. Had I known, I would have acknowledged the connection earlier." Whispers rippled through the audience as confused family members and curious onlookers tried to make sense of the exchange. My father's expression cycled through shock, confusion, and utter disbelief, his jaw literally dropping as the implications registered. For those unaware, the general continued addressing the murmuring crowd. "Colonel Mason recently led a critical operation that, while I cannot discuss details, has earned him the highest commendation. His work in military intelligence has been exceptional." The whispers grew louder. "Military intelligence, Colonel, commendation." Each word striking another blow to the false narrative my family had constructed around my supposed failure. "Colonel, would you join us on stage?" the general asked. "It seems we have an unexpected opportunity to make this ceremony even more meaningful for the Mason family." With measured steps, I walked toward the platform, feeling the weight of hundreds of stares. My father's shocked gaze followed my movement, his face pale with the realization that everything he had believed about me for years had been wrong. As I reached the stage, General Davidson extended his hand, then leaned close to whisper, "I had no idea you were operating under that level of cover, even with family. My apologies if I have compromised anything." "No compromise, sir," I replied quietly. "Just unexpected timing." With a nod, he turned back to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, a unique opportunity has presented itself. Colonel Mason, would you do us the honor of pinning the SEAL insignia on your brother?" Eric's expression was a mixture of confusion, shock, and dawning pride as I stepped toward him. Our eyes met, and in that moment the weight of years of misunderstanding passed between us. "Congratulations, little brother," I said, quietly, as I pinned the trident to his uniform. At least one of us followed the expected path. The ceremony concluded in a blur of formalities, but the real drama waited in a private meeting room where my shell-shocked family gathered immediately afterward. For several long moments after the door closed, no one spoke. My father stood rigid military bearing, unable to fully mask his internal turmoil. My mother clutched her purse with white knuckles, tears forming in the corners of her eyes. Eric, still in his formal uniform, leaned against the wall, staring at me as if seeing me for the first time. Colonel, my father, finally broke the silence, the word sounding foreign on his tongue when directed at me. "Military intelligence, yes," I confirmed simply. "For how long, since I supposedly washed out?" He shook his head, struggling to reconcile years of misconceptions with the reality standing before him. "But why would you let us believe?" "Let me believe." "Initially, it was a matter of security clearance," I explained. "Later it became easier to let you believe what you had already decided was true." "But we are family," my mother interjected, her voice wavering. "A family that was very quick to accept my failure without question." I replied, more bitterness seeping through than I had intended. "You never once considered there might be another explanation." My father's face flushed with the beginning of indignation, then drained as realization hit him. He moved to a chair and sank into it, suddenly looking older than his years. "I assumed," he said quietly. "I made assumptions about who you were, what you were capable of." Eric pushed away from the wall crossing to stand beside me. So all these years while I was training to become a SEAL, you were already serving. Already advancing through the ranks. Different path, same goal, I confirmed. We both serve just in different ways. Colonel, my father, repeated, testing the word again. They do not hand out that rank easily. You must have done things I cannot discuss. Even now I finished for him. That is the nature of my work. The next hour was filled with careful revelations. I shared what I could about my career path without compromising security protocols. My mother cried when I described my promotion to major, realizing she had missed celebrating so many milestones. Eric asked questions about where I had been stationed, understanding when I could only answer in broad generalities. My father remained uncharacteristically quiet through most of the conversation, processing the complete reversal of his understanding. Finally, as the initial shock began to wear off, he stood and approached me. Christopher, he began, his voice rough with emotion. I owe you an apology that is years overdue. I judged you by a narrow standard of what I thought service should look like. I was wrong. From my father, those last two words were monumental. Iron Bill Mason did not admit mistakes. I allowed the misunderstanding to continue, I acknowledged. That is on me. Why? He asked simply. I considered my answer carefully. At first it was easier than fighting your preconceptions. Later, when I could have corrected the record, I think part of me wanted to prove something without your knowledge or approval. To succeed on my own terms, not yours. He nodded slowly, accepting this hard truth, and succeed you have. That evening we shared the first genuine family dinner in years. The dynamics had shifted dramatically. My father, now processing that he had not one but two successful military sons, asked real questions about my work for the first time, accepting when security concerns limited my answers. My mother alternated between tears and laughter as I shared sanitized versions of my overseas experiences. The weight of perceived failure lifted from her shoulders as well. Her pride in both her sons, now equally distributed. Most surprising was the change in my relationship with Eric. Where there had been distance enforced by my supposed failure and his success, there was now recognition of two different but equally valid paths. The competitive dynamic instilled by our father gave way to mutual respect between two servicemen. So all those times I was bragging about SEAL training, Eric said with a sheepish grin, you were probably doing things that make my work look straightforward. Different challenges, different skills, I replied. We each found where we belong. My father, who had built his identity around physical courage and direct action, struggled the most to reconcile his previous dismissal of intelligence work. But as the evening progressed, I saw genuine effort in his attempts to understand my world. I always saw military service through the lens of my own experience, he admitted as the night drew to a close. I never considered there were forms of courage I might not recognize. We all have our blind spots, I offered, extending an olive branch. Even intelligence officers. In the months that followed, our family communication transformed. My father made deliberate efforts to learn about my career, respectful of classification limits, but genuinely interested in understanding my path. My mother and I established a regular call schedule that helped rebuild our connection. Most surprising was the professional relationship that developed between Eric and me. 6 months after his graduation, his SEAL team was briefed for an operation based on intelligence my unit had developed. With our respective commanding officers aware of our relationship, we were allowed to coordinate directly on certain aspects of the mission, combining our different skill sets for the first time. The mission was a success, and as we debriefed afterward, Eric grinned at me. Imagine if we had been working together all these years instead of being divided by misunderstandings. Better late than never, I replied. The greatest lesson I learned through this journey was not about proving myself to my family or earning my father's respect, though both eventually happened. It was about the damage that expectations and assumptions can inflict on relationships. My father's narrow definition of military success had blinded him to my different but equally valuable path. My own resentment had led me to perpetuate a deception long after it was strictly necessary. Only by breaking free of these patterns, by standing in our truth despite the discomfort, could we begin to see each other clearly. The revelation at Eric's ceremony might have been dramatic, but the real transformation happened in the quiet conversations that followed, when we finally began to listen to each other without the filter of preconceptions. Has your family ever completely misunderstood your life choices? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story of redemption and reconciliation resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more unexpected family revelations. Do not forget to share this video with someone who might be struggling with family expectations. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember that sometimes the greatest respect comes when you stay true to yourself, even when others doubt you.